Welcome to this flight of the Retail Pilot. I'm your host, Ken Pilot, former CEO and current brand advisor, retail tech investor and board member. I'm thrilled to share with you the insights from some of retail's legends and leaders, as well as my perspective on retail today. This podcast is sponsored by the following. Bluecore's software solution turns anonymous online shoppers into known customers and repeat customers. Bluecore enables retailers to personalize and optimize their email, SMS, and site marketing campaigns by delivering targeted and relevant messages based on where every customer is in their journey. Bluecore replaces annoying high-volume messaging with high-value messaging. Customers include Alo Yoga, Neiman Marcus, and Gap. Welcome to the Retail Pilot Tech Talk. Today, I'm with Joe Yakuel, CEO and founder of Within, a leading digital agency, and CEO of Breakfast.io, a user-generated content platform that helps brands create authentic videos from over 5,000 content creators. And we are joined by three of his customers. Soumya Sriraman is an experienced CEO and general manager with deep expertise in building streaming businesses across a variety of media platforms. She most recently led Curate Retail Group's streaming commerce business, which includes QVC and HSN. And previous to that, she led Amazon Channel's business. We are also joined by Stephen Simonis, a strategic advisor, investor, and mentor to many leading CPG brands, and is currently Chief Revenue Officer at the Beard Club. And finally, we have Cezanne Huq, who's a veteran marketer and former head of marketing at HelloFresh. Soumya, before we talk about you, because I want to understand your journey, Joe, why don't you just lay out for the listeners more about Breakfast.io and what services you provide?
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, Ken. Really appreciate it. And it's awesome to be here with Soumya. So I'll give you the quick and dirty. I started about 9 years ago an agency business called Within, which is a performance branding company. We help retailers such as North Face, Casper, Rite Aid, Foot Locker, Timberland, etc., help them scale through digital media and content. And throughout that experience, especially over the last few years, we kept telling our clients, hey, you need more content, you need more variety, you need more authenticity. And I was always met with like how, right? Why, how much, right? Time, money, resources kind of thing, expertise. And that was really the big unlock for me, which is that brands just weren't set up for success to be able to create a lot of volume and a lot of variety with high authenticity all at the same time and do that over and over again. It was just too expensive and too hard. And we created Breakfast.io to solve that problem for our clients. So that's really kind of the pain point that spurred that business. And we started going live with Breakfast out in the market about 2.5 years ago. And the success really has been driven by brands understanding how important it is, but also seeing the immediate impact that that type of approach to content really has on the business.
Soumya, welcome to the Retail Pilot. It's great to have you here today.
Of course. Thank you, Ken, for having me on this. And thank you, Joe, for inviting me to this conversation. This is a conversation I'm very passionate about because I've had a 20-year career running businesses at the likes of Universal Studios, Vivendi, BBC, Amazon Prime Video, and most recently at QVC, Curate, the parent company of QVC and HSN. And if you can read between the lines, so to speak, the through line through all of those is content. Video is at the heart of every one of those businesses. And in the way we spoke to our audiences and our customers and reached out to them to make a connection using video. And this, I think, was the reason Joe and I hit it off right away. I mean, among many other things. And we love a good debate about the industry and the lay of the land as regards video commerce, which brought us together.
Video content now, probably more than ever, is so critically important. And we're seeing it play out across social media. We're seeing it play out in TikTok, in Reels, on Instagram, Facebook, etc. But the challenge, Joe, as you nailed, is how do I create this video content? Who's creating it? How often do I need to create it? Maybe I don't want to do it because it is overwhelming. And I've worked with a couple of different companies that leverage video content or need video content for their platforms, because whether they're doing shoppable video or live stream video, someone's got to put that content together. And I think what's so interesting about Breakfast.io is they're solving that problem. They're taking away the biggest excuse for not creating video or for creating video, which is who's going to own the content, who's going to keep it fresh. And Joe, tell us a little bit about the team that you have that you use to do just that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm happy you brought it up in that way because on the agency side, we have a full creative agency, right? We have a full creative team, and their entire job is creating content for most of it, also specifically for paid social. And I think what's interesting is that while that works really well for brands, it's to me one flavor of that content, right? I like to think about it maybe better than a flavor, more like a layer cake, right? If brands want to be super successful on social, they need all the layers of that cake. And one layer is what I would consider to be like brand content or studio content, right? Another layer of that is UGC content, right? Another layer of that might be influencer content. We could talk about the difference between those two in a second. And another flavor of that might be customer content, right? And that's all together that kind of cake that you really bring to market, because different people will want to resonate with different things at different times, right? Just think about yourself in a consumer journey. If you've never heard about a brand, the thing that might drive you in might be an influencer. You might later on see UGC content from a content creator. Or you might then go, to site and then get targeted from a branded piece of content. Later on, you might see an offer, right? Then you might do a branded search query and see a text ad and convert. That first piece of content might have been the best thing to get you into the funnel, but might not work to help close the transaction at the end. And that's why all of this together is that volume and variety and authenticity that we really want to see from brands. It's not only do UGC, right? It's not only do studio, but it's really a mix of all of these things that come together and really kind of hit home and convert. The way that we do it at Breakfast is that we have a network of creators. We have over 5,000 of them, because if we wanted to do what we do with Breakfast with our internal creative agency, it wouldn't be possible, because you'd never get enough volume and you'd never get enough variety from the same team. The one group of people can't produce infinite variety. It's just not possible. By having a network of 5,000 creators, every time you launch a brief, you can put some of your best performing creators from the past on it. You can put new creators on it. Every one of those creators will deliver something that's very, very different, even against the exact same brief. And I think that's the beauty of the creator economy, and something that we've really harnessed at Breakfast while taking all the operational hassle out of it, because these people are all opted into the platform. They've already signed up for Breakfast. They know how it works. They know how it pays. There's no outreach. There's no negotiation. You just launch your brief, they apply. And if you approve them, they'll give you content. It's really streamlines the entire process.
So let's put that into the context of the problem that you were either solving for QVC or Soumya, the problem you went to Joe to solve.
So again, I will have to give credit to Joe, because I think Joe made it apparent. What we thought we wanted was to find a way to optimize the multitude of videos that were available, but I'm going to say formatting them to allow the algorithms to do its best. And which is when I think Joe was like, we should be speaking to these other cohorts, because you've just shown me that you actually have different audiences. Why do you think format is what speaks to a different audience? It's more than format. It's voice, it's mannerisms.
So Joe, if you've seen the landscape now, and you threw out really the different types of videos that are coming at us, and I'm going to be the us side. I'm the customer side now. Certainly influencer, very important, but sometimes, am I being sold to? They're benefiting from it. How real is it? Versus UGC, which comes from someone that may be more passionate about the product, versus a brand video, which is obviously produced and much more like a commercial. So those are the three types. And I guess depending on the brand, as you alluded to, there isn't necessarily one way to go. You may want to use all three and learn what's really working with your customer. How are you measuring the response to each? What are you looking for to say, hey, this is your most successful use of video.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's not which one's better, right? It's how do you use them all together in a way that 1 + 1 + 1 instead of equaling 3 can equal 5, right? Or 6 or 7. I couldn't agree more with what Sonia was saying, where, brands want to cut it up, right? So to speak. Hey, I have this video for TV. Let's use this for social. Or even if it's, hey, I have this video for Instagram stories. Let's just put it on TikTok and YouTube shorts, right? It's all vertical, and I think, this is the problem, is that it's hard to do behavior change for humans. It's even harder to do behavior change for businesses made up of lots of humans, right? And what we find is that brands, for the longest time, were creating content that was on brand, that was shot in a studio. And then one day people were saying, oh, by the way, make that vertical. And that was like a big deal, right? Even if brands want to create different content for different platforms, if they're still doing it all through that same lens of on-brand studio content, again, better, right? That's a better version than just cutting it up and shipping it across all the platforms. But even if you do produce a YouTube short separate from a TikTok, separate from an Instagram story, right? Purposefully, if it's still all looking like branded studio content, you're still only taking a piece of the pie. So what we want to see brands do is create all this different type of content so that you get much more volume and much more variety, right? You have lots of very authentic content, but you also have your branded content, right? And then you feed all of that to the algorithms, which really means we're not going to choose what we serve to who and when, right? We can't possibly predict that nearly as well as the platforms can, because they have so much data on the first-party data on the individual user that we don't have, right? These are not existing customers or we already know a ton about them. This is prospecting, right? And with prospecting, we want to feed the algorithm all of that volume and all of that variety so that it can serve the right ad to the right user at the right time based on who they are, what their intent is or is not, and where they are in the conversion funnel. And I think one of the funniest things we see, and this is like a little bit of a different topic, but I think very, very related, is that we'll see that the top spending ad in an ad set might be a video ad, right? Often is. And then people will look at the CPA of that ad or the ROAS of that ad and compare it to the other ads in the same ad set and say, hey, the top spending ad actually has a worse performance, right? Worse CPA or worse ROAS. And then they'll want to kill it, right? And when they do that, what they'll find is that the entire ad set performance drops, right? Now, these brands are saying, hey, like, this is an obvious win, right? More of my spend is going to this ad that has lower performance. If I kill that ad, it'll push the spend to the other ads. The other ads have better performance. Easy win, right? And what they don't realize is that the reporting they're looking at the ad level is last touch, right? And therefore, if you have a video ad that does an amazing job at bringing people into the funnel, right? Into the funnel doesn't even mean they clicked, by the way. It just means that into the funnel, they saw that video ad and they're maybe more likely to click on the next ad they see, or maybe they'll visit the site later direct or whatever the case is, right? Facebook sees those signals and they understand them much better than a human can. And the reason why Facebook would be pushing spend behind a video ad like that in the top spending slot, even at a lower return, is because it understands that ad is what helps drive the return for the ad set overall. And that's why when you kill that top spending ad, even if it has worse performance, the overall ad set will then suffer because now you lost the thing that brings people in, right? So video in particular, especially really well done, authentic video, can do so much for you to bring people into the funnel, but then don't get in your own way by then killing or biting the hand that feeds, so to speak, by then killing the video that did such a good job at bringing people into the funnel because you're looking at a last touch metric on the ad level.
I think brands often mistake the whole funnel, which is reach, engagement, and conversion, and do not know how to optimize for all three of those in video. And I think that that's what Joe's talking about, which is so important. It is not always about the tip of conversion, nor is it merely about engagement, how many minutes, nor is it about reach. It's about how you optimize all three of those. It's understanding which asset performed which role for you while not losing the whole picture.
No,
Right, which is to say you can't do good full funnel marketing, but then make your decisions in the tactics based on last touch attribution, right? Like those two things are like oil and water.
it's no different than how stores get merchandised. You clearly know that maybe a certain color is not going to drive the volume, but it's going to make the stack look a lot better. Let's talk a little bit more about the Breakfast IO process. If I come to Breakfast IO and I have a brief and I clearly know I need some user-generated content, give you the brief, how many people on your team of 5,000, will see/read or hear that brief in order to come back to you/me with something that I might like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So brands write that brief along with our account team here at Breakfast. So we'll help them with that and we'll hold their hand through that process just to make sure that they have all the do's and don'ts in there. And the don'ts are sometimes just as important as the do's, right, for creators. And then it'll go out to our network of creators. Now, sometimes in that brief is already something that will kind of filter out a lot of those creators, right? It could be something based on age and gender. It could be something based on really anything, geography, whether you're in a home or an apartment, right? Depending on the brief, it could filter out a lot of creators right out of the gate.
Sure.
And then for the creators that are inside of the profile that brief calls for, those creators have the opportunity to apply.
But roughly, understanding it really hitting or resonating with certain creators. Roughly, would I be getting a brief back from 50, 100, 150?
Yeah.
What's a number?
Yeah, so you're delivering that brief into the platform. All the creators who are eligible to see that brief will be able to see it.
Right.
The only ones that apply are the ones who actually want to deliver against that brief. And the brand will typically also determine how many creators they want because they have to pay for each creator. They might say, hey, I only want 2 or I want 20. And then creators will apply. Sometimes you'll get 10 creators to apply. Sometimes you might get 50 creators to apply. It could even be 100, right? It depends on the brief and how exciting it is for the creators. Believe it or not, a lot of times the creators are excited just by the product or the brand, and that's why they're interested, not just the money, right? So that depends on how much of a product market fit there is, right, with the creators themselves too, and how exciting that is. Sometimes we're sending people really high value product, right, and they're allowed to keep it very often. So there's kind of multiple incentives for the creator there. And then the brand gets to approve the creators that they actually want to work with. That process takes brands like 2 minutes. Right, so basically the briefing process takes them about a half an hour to write that brief with our team. Creators will apply, they'll approve creators, and like I said, literally in a few minutes. The creators will then get the product and create the content and upload it. This is where the brands then actually watch the content that was delivered. So depending on how many creators, right, it'll change, but maybe 20, 30 minutes to review content. And once they've reviewed it and approved it, they're ready to go live and they can take those assets with them and do whatever they want with them. So this is one of the things that I always tell people who want to work with Breakfast, like it's not just a matter of saving money on the content itself, which you will save a ton of money relative to influencers, because on influencer, you're paying a really high premium for the fact that they're an influencer, right? They have an audience, they're putting it on their organic. At Breakfast, these are not necessarily influencers. Some of them might be, but most of them are just creators. They don't even have a following. They're not posting this organically. You're paying a lot less for it, but you're also saving so much time. Right, we have an influencer team here as part of our agency business. A ton of their time is spent on outreach, negotiation, and legal, right? Ton. We take all of that out of the equation where the only thing you're doing is writing a brief, approving creators, and approving content because all of the other stuff is already built into the platform.
What is the optimal amount of time a video should run?
Okay, so in my experience, you don't want a social video to be any greater than 15 seconds. The optimal engagement time is between 6 and 12 seconds is my experience. I don't know what yours is, Joe.
Yeah, I was going to say almost exactly the same thing, right? I think like somewhere around 8 to 12, 15 seconds is kind of the sweet spot. One of the things that we have tested that's kind of funny is that if you create the same spot, right? So take that same, let's say 12-second spot that Somya and I are both recommending, and then add more content to the end of it. And I say it that way purposely because there's a very big difference between creating a minute-long spot and creating a 12-second spot that then has like more after, right? And what we found is that the ones that have more after can drive lift as long as the first 12 seconds are still optimized like a 12-second spot. When people create a long spot and don't optimize it as if it's a short, right, then by the time the call to action happens, nobody's watching anymore. Right, so what we call the hook, which is arguably the most important part of the video, is the first 1 to 2 seconds. If you don't have a great hook and then deliver your call to action within the next few seconds after that, most of the people are already gone. And that's why creating a long video without making the first 12 seconds optimized like a standalone spot is a big mistake. But there's not downside to adding on content after that, because if they want to keep watching, let them keep watching.
And TikTok, the average person views, I think, a video for 2.3 seconds. Wow. So that's probably the most radical end of the spectrum, up to 12 seconds. But it's good benchmark to understand what the customer is actually consuming or what you need to be effective within. One area, of course, I think that UGC could be most beneficial to a brand is in beauty. How to apply beauty product, benefits, here's how you do it, here's what to expect, here's how to mix it, how to try it. Areas where customers really need to see application, I think could have a huge return. And I've seen that with other video content, certainly when it's been on one site.
Yeah, like shoppable video, right? Like there's so much buzz around shoppable video. And I think shoppable video is another good example, like I was saying earlier, with why we started breakfast. Like brands just aren't built for that yet, right? In the future, maybe they'll all be doing it in their sleep. But right now, brands just don't understand how to create that type of content. And this type of creator content is perfect for shoppable video platforms.
Well, it's when you say that, you're 100% right. I mean, you and I have discussed Firework before that has shoppable video, shoppable live stream. No offense to the Firework folks, but that part of the technology is not that complicated. The technology is actually fairly easy. What really creates pause for companies is, okay, now that I've got the technology, what's my strategy? How much content am I going to produce? Who's going to produce it? How often do we need to produce it? And all of a sudden, the strategy and the thought about the content and how much I need kills the opportunity. But if I now have this technology, which is an easy plugin, and I have a strategic answer to how I'm going to deal with the opportunity, there's no reason you can't create great shoppable video or great live stream. But up until this point, it's really been the content that has caused the major block for companies to not move forward with both shoppable live stream and shoppable video.
100%. And I think, actually one of the brands that we work with that I'm really impressed by is Kraft Heinz, because it's such a big company, but they're actually doing things that are pretty scrappy and innovative. They're one of our breakfast clients across Jell-O and Lunchables and Capri Sun. And they're actually using this type of content on the PDPs for their Target product listings, right? So retail media application, really simple. You're used to seeing a still image, right? Product laydown, white background type of stuff. But even on Amazon, right, and Target and places like that, right, you can upload lots of content on the product page, not just one image. And for somebody who wants to understand a real life application, like give them one, right? Don't just tell them how they can use it in the description, right? Show them in a way that's really authentic and wasn't done in a studio where it looks perfect, right?
As a brand, as a retailer, who else is in the space? Who else might I have at an RFP that would be alongside a Breakfast.io?
Yeah, I mean, I could speak to it from my side, and some of you, maybe you want to speak to it from yours if there's anything you want to add. I think the thing that we see most often is influencer, right? That's really what we see the most. And then separate from that, we see people leveraging customer content. And I always tell people, like, you should do all of them, right? It's not about or, it's about and. And influencer has something that creator content doesn't, right? Influencer has built-in credibility with a built-in audience, right? And if that's what you need, then you should do influencer, right? Meaning if your goal is to get credibility with a specific audience and you've identified an influencer who already has that captive audience and you're willing to pay a premium to drive that reach and engagement, then go and get that influencer, right? If you need application well beyond that and you want content to be used across the funnel, not just for reaching net new people or for a net new product launch, but for existing customers, for retargeting, for prospecting, for TikTok, for YouTube, for Meta, right? Then getting a ton of influencer content across all of those platforms just becomes exorbitantly expensive. Like I mentioned earlier, not just money, but also operational costs. So pairing them together is a much more effective strategy, because then you can get the influencers where you really need that premium, or that premium pays. And then you fill in the tail with a ton more volume than you could ever get pound for pound, dollar for dollar by getting creators to fill in that rest of that volume and the rest of that variety. And the combination of that is so much more powerful.
And like, if I can build upon that, I think about video and I think about content as a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is branded content, very small volume, but hopefully very incisive and making the point that it needs to. The next layer is influencer content. Again, fewer in quantity, but sort of taking from the brand voice that you have, but speaking about it in a broader tone. The next layer, which I think has to be the foundational layer, is UGC content, where it can have the stylized component, yet give you the volume to build upon. The very last layer is your customer content that Joe talked about. Again, this is where you have the mass volume, but it's not necessarily usable everywhere. Whereas in today's world, you can use all of these other three layers of content in a multitude of ways to mix and match, to leverage it, because customers and audiences now are very comfortable knowing, because they are in social in as much as they are on TV, in as much as they are on site. And they're comfortable navigating all of these different voices and pieces of content.
Content is great, and it's the most authentic, right? You can't get more authentic than that. The challenge is that they're just not they're not content creators, and it just requires a lot more edit, right? So just going back to operational costs, right, beyond just the cost of paying a creator or an influencer, customer content is great, but it just needs to be edited down. And that's why there is a use case for it, but it doesn't solve the problem. It is just another flavor or another layer to that cake.
Well, certainly UGC is probably the most easiest to access and most affordable. And if it's not part of one's layer cake, as you said earlier, then you're just not going to have a well-baked cake. Thank you, Soumya. And now we'll speak with Stephen Simonis, CRO of the Beard Club. Hi, Stephen. Welcome to the Retail Pilot Tech Talk. Overall, how does the Beard Club think about its content strategy?
We really try and personalize the content as much as we can for each part of the funnel. And so, we want to tailor the content to who wants to see it, where they want to see it, when they want to see it. And then we're trying to think about each individual's consumer journey. Not every consumer will want to see the same thing in the same part of their journey. And so it's not as simple as aspirational content in the top of the funnel and then let's do UGC on Meta. We really need to understand, what is the best content for each consumer? Who wants to see the content with our celebrity partners? We have James Harden, Kid Cudi. Who wants to see that in their commercial on TV? Who needs to see promotional content on TV? And that same strategy applies throughout the funnel. So how do we think about UGC across the bottom of the funnel? How do we source creators and influencers that'll resonate with different personas? And for us, we joked about it early, but it is particularly challenging for us since we do serve men in all different parts of their beard journey. We need content that resonates with men who want to grow their beards. We need content that resonates with users who already have big beards and are looking to groom it. And so sourcing all of those variables takes a ton of resources and a ton of time. And so along with the team internally, we've partnered with some external partners to help us manage that workflow and to try and scale it.
Let's take a quick break with a word from our sponsors. Predict Spring is a global point-of-sale platform live in 22 countries. The platform includes mobile POS, endless aisle, fulfillment, inventory management, and clienteling, creating a true omni experience for customers and associates. Predict Spring powers Suit Supply, Converse, Lovesac, Decium, Janie and Jack, and Bouclair. Joe, when you think about a UGC strategy, user-generated strategy for Beard Club, knowing that they do have some pretty strong, high-powered celebrities, who are you looking for, and or how big is the response that you get by your community from those who want to be part of this journey?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And, I think the internal team at Beard Club that works under Steven works with a bunch of influencers. And I think, it's a good place to start out talking about the distinction between influencers and creators, right? On the breakfast.io platform, we're working with creators, not necessarily influencers. And it's really purposefully done that way because we can get a lot more scale at a much lower cost because we're not paying a premium for the fact that these people, have a following and have an audience, because they don't. So in that sense, we get a lot of response because people, really resonate with the brand and resonate with the product. But at the same time, we don't have to worry about paying a price premium because of them having a following or not. And therefore, we're able to get a lot of variety. And that's really the key. How can we get a lot of volume and a lot of variety and do that at an affordable cost? And I think we've done that really, really successfully with Steven and the Beard Club team by partnering together to make sure that we're getting the right type of creators. Like Steven mentioned, different people in their beard journey, different types of beard, different elements of expertise in grooming it. And it's because we have a network of over 5,000 creators that we can always find more and more that really meet those different criteria at scale. And do that not just at an efficient cost in terms of paying for the content, but also operationally, right? Making it a lot easier for Steven to get this content done by not making it painful for him to do a lot of outreach. These creators already opted into the platform. So once we get people to apply that meet the criteria, all he's got to do is click a button to approve them, and it makes it a lot faster.
Stephen, you mentioned earlier that your journey included working within prior to coming to the Beard Club. Were there others that you considered on the user-generated content side, or what led you to wanting to use Breakfast to do the creator portion of the journey for you with video?
Well, Joe here is one reason. To your point, I've been super fortunate to have a bunch of successful partnerships with Within over the years. And, I think we're working on our 5th brand together now. So when he mentioned Breakfast to me, I had a pretty good feeling this would work for us, and it did. The content authenticity is out of this world. If it wasn't running from our handle, I don't think you'd know it's not an organic post. And they actually play this game at some conferences that I've seen, which is always fun, where they'll show 2 ads. One's a breakfast one and one is not. And the crowd votes which one is a breakfast ad. And amazingly, they can never get it right. And they always pick the more obvious ad because I think brands just expect UGC content nowadays to be studio produced. And they know it's really hard to create super authentic content. And that's why this partnership in particular has been super successful. And we wanted to partner with Breakfast.
Going back to the strategy, when you think about the different elements of content that you create, whether it's celebrity or UGC, how do you think about the content relative to the medium, whether it's connected TV, TikTok, Reels? How are you viewing the playing field in terms of what you want to use in each and what's most successful?
Yeah, UGC has played an important role for us in the content mix. And it's certainly been one of the more effective content types to help us convert at a super high rate, but it's actually also been super helpful in storytelling. And so to me, it feels like there's really been a material shift in the role a brand plays, making emotional connections with its consumers. It doesn't feel like we live in this world where your brand voice or your brand content is the sole medium in which we can make emotional connections with consumers. We can also speak through a network of our consumers' peers. And I truly feel today's consumer expects a level of social proof. They want to see their peers sharing their emotions and their thoughts on brands and products. And so to be able to leverage UGC, not just to convert, but to also help us with the storytelling throughout the different channel mix has been remarkable. We actually recently just launched our first commercial to support our launch on Target shelves. And it's a hero spot. It features James Harden and our beard trimmer. And we really wanted to generate a lot of buzz and excitement around it. One of the more effective ways that we did that was actually generate UGC content that spoke to the commercial. And so instead of pumping more ad dollars to get eyeballs on that content, we took those dollars and put them behind creator content, where we have them talking about this viral James Harden commercial. And since then, we've actually seen view count, units per store per week continuing to climb as we're generating this buzz around it. And so it's been a really interesting way to think about how to leverage creators on these more UGC-focused channels, lower funnel, to generate awareness and engagement with higher funnel content.
Out of curiosity, Stephen, James Harden is a star and he's got one hell of a beard. You think of beard, you look it up in the dictionary and there's James Harden waving at you. But, that can't come, that comes with an expense to have a celebrity like that. When you look at ads that you run with a celebrity where you poured money into it, versus the click-through conversion, the return you get on UGC. Where does one come out versus the other?
Good question. It varies by part in the funnel for us. And it also depends on prospect and persona. And so going back to, I think one of the things we were talking about earlier is like, how do you match the right content featuring the right persona, whether that's a UGC creator or that is a celebrity, and trying to find the right mix where how do we buy spots on NBA playoffs featuring James Harden? How do we find spots in MLB and feature Justin Turner and some of the other partners that we have? And then where does the UGC content fit into that funnel? Perhaps that persona doesn't need UGC. Perhaps they do. And trying to figure out where it fits the best. And in that testing, we've been able to try and relatively keep the content, the engagement relatively flat across both UGC and some of that more aspirational content by getting super targeted for the personas.
Joe, as far as storytelling goes, obviously you're recruiting the talent here. That's your job. But how involved do you get with brands around the storytelling and the creative thread?
Yeah, so there's really a few different ways that we see people leveraging breakfast, and it all starts with a brief, right? So sometimes there's already a story that the brand wants to tell, right? So maybe it's like the new launch of a product, right? So if the Beard Club is going to launch, let's say, a new derma roller, right? They might say, hey, let's create a breakfast brief around that. These are the value props we want to make sure get across. Here's the kind of upgrade from the last product release. This is what we want people to be saying. And then that brief gets constructed with the help of our account team, and it goes out to the network of creators to then kind of apply to join that brief. Other times, it's trend driven, right? We might say, hey, Steven, there's this really hot trend happening right now, right? We want to jump on it, whether it's on TikTok or on YouTube Shorts or on Instagram. It's something that we already see trending, in pop culture, for example, and we want to do something with the brand that relates back to that, and we'll create a brief for that. And then other times, it's things that we see are performing across our network of creators and brands. We're like, hey, this content format or this brief format and style is working really well, right? And we want to go ahead and take advantage of that across our clients. So there's so many different ways it can be used, right? Obviously, there's going to be like seasonality and holiday and promo kind of briefs and things like that. But that's kind of the back and forth, right? What is the brand doing and how can we extend that through our network of creators to get a lot more volume and variety against a story they're already telling? Is there a story that we see as an opportunity for the brand to tell based on things that are more macro and outside of just what the brand is doing? And how can we apply that to the brand and get more out of it? So it really goes in both directions. And I think that's what makes the content also stay fresh, is that it's not all just another creator against the same brief month over month, but new brief ideas that come from both sides. And a lot of that comes from what's trending in platform.
Think about the presentation of the customer. There are a number of ways that UGC can show up. It can show up on the landing page. It can show up in an email, connected TV, TikTok. Where do you see video being most important or most influential in the customer journey?
Yeah, so this one actually I wanted to put back to you, Steven. You were mentioning earlier about how powerful the authenticity can really be in storytelling. And I think when people hear UGC, the first thing they think of is ads. But Steven, actually, you guys have been pretty good at using that content outside of just paid ads. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about how you can kind of stitch that journey from end to end beyond just the ad experiences themselves.
Sure. Yeah, actually, it was, I think just last week, we put together a campaign to support our launch into Target, leveraging content creators. And we actually just leveraged, the content came back so great. We were super excited about it. We actually just leveraged it in an email to our direct to consumer base. And so, we wanted to create buzz and excitement around the launch. And we found this content to be super impactful. We had run some ads against it, super high engagement. And so we leveraged it in an email to our direct to consumer base, talking about our Target launch, and saw almost a 30% lift in click-through rate versus our launch email, which had super high engagement already because it was a very impactful moment for our brand and had a lot of engagement. But we still saw about a 30% increase by leveraging this UGC content in the email. So that was super impactful for us.
That being said, I look a lot at, obviously, we all shop online a lot. I don't see a ton of video being used on site, and wondering where your head is around that, Steven. And then same question for you, Joe. Are you encouraging some of your customers to get more video content on their e-commerce sites?
Yeah, we've been exploring that a lot in the past few weeks, trying to figure out how shoppable video and shoppable content on the site plays a role in getting users down the funnel. And so we've looked at essentially trying to figure out what part in this journey does it make sense. It goes back to even, top of the funnel, now you're in the bottom of the funnel, and how do we leverage this? Is this PDP content? Is it FAQ videos? Like, how can we leverage this at different parts of the funnel to help push users down, help educate, and help inform, no matter what part of the journey they're in? And so we've yet to bring that to life, but really excited to see the technology that's out there today and the different ways that we could leverage it. And so we're excited to take some of this content that we've been generating both internally and externally and figuring ways how to help that push users down our funnel.
In terms of time to create a campaign, Stephen, if you present Breakfast.io with a brief, how long does it typically take for them to come back to you with content?
Well, the beautiful thing about them is they present me with briefs. So they certainly have been helping us out a lot on the brief side as well. But yeah, I mean, it's less than 2 weeks, which is pretty great.
Wow.
Especially because so much of this type of content is trending. Joe was mentioned that earlier. Another huge value add of these partners is that they are way more in tune with the trends that are going on in this content than I'll ever be, or an internal team, I think, can be. And so being able to be super fast timing and hit these trends while they're hot has been really great for us.
And Joe, is it fair to assume that for the most part, your customers, your clients are leaning into TikTok and Reels with UGC, or is it that and other places as well? But where's the majority of the UGC dollars being shown?
Yeah, I would say all across Meta and TikTok as a combination is really where we see most of it go. I would say following that is really YouTube Shorts. And then following that is where we really start seeing more and more of it starting to pop up on CTV. Actually, Steven's one of our top clients in terms of the amount of volume that we're able to test, which is a partnership with also the brand in terms of their willingness to test through that much content. But Steven, I think you guys tested through like hundreds of videos, last month.
Yeah, April we tested over 1,000.
Yeah, and I think that's I'm so happy you're putting up a number like that, because when I talk to brands, like sometimes they hear these words and they think that a lot of volume is like 20 videos, right? And I'm like, let me just set a baseline, right? Like a minimum, I want to see you be doing 100 videos a month.
So Joe, give us a quick idea of a brief that you're putting out to the UGC community in terms of what the pitch line might be, and also, do the UGC members come back to you with a pitch, and are you telling them how long? What's the optimal length? Give us a little bit of color around the process.
Yeah, so briefs are really flexible, and it's designed on that way on purpose, because that's where we get a lot of the variety from. And then the brand, in combination with us in terms of what the brief is for, are going to put up guardrails where they make sense. So sometimes we'll put up guardrails around the length. Other times we won't, because we actually want people to come back with content of different lengths, right? So it just depends on what we're trying to achieve. But a brief can have anything from basic do's and don'ts, like on the creator guideline side that we mentioned earlier. Then, like, what is we actually trying to do with this brief? Is it a certain product we're pushing? Is it a certain promotion or seasonality, right? Or gifting idea? Or is this some sort of trend that we're hopping on in terms of the style of the content itself? What are the call to actions? Is there something that we want to have in an end card, right? These are all things that can go into a brief. Some briefs are incredibly open-ended on purpose. Other briefs are incredibly specific. The more specific the brief, the less variety you're going to get back from the creators, right? And all of that can be by design.
How does one become a member of your community?
Oh, great question. It sounds like Ken wants to be a creator. Ken, we'd love to have you. I don't know if you're going to get through the application process, but you can apply and we'll vet you. But anybody can go to breakfast.io as a brand or a creator. And if you're a creator, you can just apply to become a creator right there through the website. And then we'll go through a vetting process. We only accept about 5% of the applicants on average. And then there's a bit of training that happens just to make sure that our creators understand how to make great ads. So what does it mean to have a really good hook? How should a video end? How should it be edited? How to use text overlay, things like that. And then once you've gone through that process, you become an approved creator and you can start applying to briefs. And then if you start to perform well, actually there's a second tier called elite creators for people that have already created quality content that brands are happy with and that perform. And that's kind of like another section of our community.
And what's the business model look like for me? Since I got called out for getting ready to apply, I'd like to know what my remuneration might look like?
Yeah, so there's a couple different business models that brands are on, and then based on what model they're on, creators get paid out differently. So we have something called the performance model, and that's where creators make a small upfront fee, but then make a percentage of the ad spend as you scale. So for very performance-focused advertisers that are really looking for this content to be used on paid only, that's a really good model because you can take, as a brand, you can take a lot more shots on goal. And as a creator, you have an ability to participate in the upside. So they don't make as much money up front, but if their ad is the winning ad, they can make a lot more than they would have in the other model. And then the other model is a flat fee model. So the brands pay a flat fee and a percentage of that flat fee goes to the creator as well.
Thank you, Joe and Stephen. Great speaking with you both. We are now going to move on to Cezanne, former VP of Growth for HelloFresh. Cezanne, thank you for joining us today on the Retail Pilot Tech Talk. Cezanne, for those listening, tell everyone a little bit about HelloFresh, what you guys actually do for those who may not be familiar with HelloFresh.
Great question. We are at the very, I'd say at the 100,000 foot view level. We're here to change the way people eat forever. How we do that very simply is we've taken the experience of grocery shopping, sourcing ingredients, recipe dinner planning, and meal planning, and shrunk it from a 2-hour time frame to 30 minutes vis-a-vis meal kits. We've acquired Factor, which is the next evolution of meals. That's now going to 2 minutes or less. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. We have 4 brands, 2 of which you already mentioned, HelloFresh, and then I mentioned Factor. We also have Green Chef and EveryPlate.
Talk a little bit to us about what the thought was from a marketing perspective or growth perspective that led you to go after, in a more aggressive way than perhaps you were, video as a means of moving the brand forward, of driving sales. And then you can add on to that how you landed on Breakfast.io.
Our strategy was primarily to focus on media consumption. So if you think about paid social evolution in the last, say, 5 years, it's drastically shifted away from feeds, right? News, connections on Meta, for example, to stories and reels, which are primarily video driven. And our company, in this case, HelloFresh, and mostly D2C, has been sort of a heritage static creative shop, whether it's in-house or outhoused creative production. And the goal was really tactically putting a stake in the ground and saying, you know what, we're only doing 10% video on Meta. I want to get to 50% by the end of the year. And yes, I want all the performance accoutrements to go with it, right? I don't want to just throw money away. So we started on that journey and we learned that talent is important as a consideration. And we kind of take this for granted, right? Static ads. It's like one frame, some copy, a strong offer, strong copy, don't get me wrong. But now you're going into video and it's a completely different capability. So we looked at our internal capabilities and realized, wow, we've built this whole legacy shop around static production. And we don't have the talent in-house to be able to chase after that performance video, elusive, creative production that we need. So we looked at partners that we can bring on board that had shared our passion for performance and really being where consumers are. And we found Breakfast in that process, and they've been part of the journey to getting us to that 50-50. We're looking at 75-25 this year, hopefully flipping it completely on its head, 10% static, 90% video next year.
What are the results you're beginning to see with video? And I assume, as you mentioned, it's really appearing mostly in your social channels, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, potentially CTV. Tell us about the results you're seeing and also where we might come across your video content.
We did see really high engagement rates, which surprised us. 3-4x our static engagement rates, click-through rates. Not surprising. As we looked at performance, we also saw an additional opportunity, and that was an opportunity to educate people, to essentially groom the future meal kit ready to heat prospects and really make them aware of our products. And they may not be ready now, but boy, we've got their data and information because we have a CDP, we're collecting all this back-end information. So it's allowing us to collect this incredible amount of data, obviously non-PII, but it provides that insight. We are then taking the folks that are ready to convert through our conversion campaigns that may be static. So we found that a video and then static companion strategy is a really great way to kind of target the full funnel on social.
Actors or your user-generated content creators.
I'll start at the top. I guess the basic principle was we realized we didn't have the talent in-house. We needed to be, so that's one, talent gap, staff augmentation, whatever you want to call it. Second reason is that my principle for performance marketing and even brand marketing has always been have a challenger partner in the mix that's also challenging us. So it's not like we're not thinking about building our own capability, but we're never not going to have a partner like breakfast because our business is meal kits, right? Our business is not producing content at the scale and level and sophistication as a breakfast, right? So we would learn from breakfast and power those insights and power our own team to be able to push the envelope further. Third piece is really making sure that we selected a partner that shares the same measurement, attribution, strategies. That's hard to find. Good luck finding partners that understand performance video. I don't know if there's such a thing that's been coined, but it is hard to make video work. And it requires a very native understanding. And I would even argue it's impossible to hire an agency to be able to do that type of work, which is where I feel like Joe's team comes into play. We're talking about creators, and those creators are creating on our behalf, not Joe and his team, but creators.
And producing the UGC. What have you learned and what mistakes have you made that you won't repeat?
Yeah, I think the key thing here is we need to let our partner be able to go broad to go narrow. So I think that's one big mistake we made early on was as a D2C company, we tend to want to control everything. And that's everything from getting too much into the weeds in terms of the creative execution, but also the performance metrics. So it was really important for us to learn that we had to go broad and then go narrow, not go narrow and then scale up. So that's a key learning for us from just a management perspective.
But I think, what we find is that the thing that people do to get in their own way, to kind of answer your other question, Ken, is they try to hold everything to a brand guideline that they've used internally before. And I think this is like a, kind of learning process that we go through with almost every client that we onboard to breakfast, which is that, hey, you have brand guidelines and that's great for branded content. That doesn't mean anything that's not branded content is not on brand. You can be on brand and not be branded content, right? And that's where authentic content or UGC content comes in. So what we do with brands is we help them take their branded guidelines and turn them into what we call creator guidelines, which you can basically think about as a looser version, right? It's like only the absolute requirements, but none of the other nice to haves that you would require in a studio shoot with your internal creative team. And consumers these days know when they're seeing creator content. You don't even need to tell them. It's not like you have to say, by the way, this wasn't made in our studio, so that's why it's not polished. They know, right? And it's way more authentic when you speak to them through that type of content voice. And I think the result is almost always the same, which is that when we launch a brand on breakfast, number one, the amount of content in their ad account goes up drastically. The percentage of their spend that goes to video content goes up drastically. And we're able to either improve the CPA drastically and keep the overall spend the same, or like what we did with Cezanne was keep the CPA the same and see the spend go up, right? Just a matter of which one you prefer. But the efficiency is always there, and you just either take it in pure CPA efficiency or in incremental scale. And we have a few examples that we could share, but I think a couple notable ones, Timberland is a good example of this where, we launched a lot of UGC for them and we saw that those UGC ads had about, 50% higher ROAS on Meta than the non-UGC ads. Or QVC where, we saw about a 20% lower CPA with UGC content. Or Michael's where we saw, a 40% lower CPA and we saw a lot more incremental scale at the same time. Right. So the numbers are material. Like we're not talking about like 2% gain, 5% gain. I don't think we ever really show a gain of less than 20% simply because of that combination that I mentioned earlier. It's really volume, variety, authenticity, and a hook.
As we look forward, Joe, and we can conclude with your comment on the following, I'm curious to hear what you think. How will we know if what we're seeing is truly human user-generated content, or will it be AI-generated human-like content?
Yeah, it's a great question. And frankly, we're spending a lot of time right now trying to figure out how AI plays in the breakfast platform. And I think that there's a short term and a long term here. I think that we're still a little bit away from really good, indistinguishable, fully AI-driven content that has the authenticity and the capability that we can currently get from our creators. But I think in the short term, there's probably a lot that we can do and we're working on doing that I just can't share right now of using AI on top of the content that we're getting from the creators. So still getting from scratch human-driven content, but using AI to basically, to simplify, make that content perform better and work harder for us and our clients. I think in the future, you will see that. And again, going back to my layer cake example, I don't think that there's ever going to be a world where brands are going to say, we only make this type of content, right? So do I think that there will be a world where both breakfast and outside of breakfast, people will be getting fully AI-driven content that looks and feels like UGC? For sure. I do think that will happen. But I think that that is not going to be a replacement. It will be an addition.
And that concludes today's flight of the Retail Pilot Tech Talk. I want to thank Joe Yakuel and his guests for joining us today and taking us through some interesting case studies on how user-generated content is really helping to grow marketing, not only within social media, but marketing in general. If anyone has any questions or would like to reach Joe, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'd be more than happy to connect you with him. Thanks for tuning in to this week's flight of the Retail Pilot, and please give us a review on your favorite podcast platform.